Hello, everybody. Today our Zoom class about common mallow, and our presenter is Sharon Kaplan, who is our new Master Gardeners for Tulare and Kings counties. So Sharon, it's on you now.
All right. Well, welcome to my debut here with a presentation on common mallow. I know it's hard to be inside on a nice fall day, but I appreciate you joining us. Common mallow, or Malva neglecta, is in the family of Malvaceae. And when you think of common mallow, for most of us who spend time in the garden, you're just pretty much thinking of a pesky, ever-present, year-round weed. But I'm wanting you to consider that beautiful family that it comes from, the mallow family. There are 4,225 species of plants, shrubs, and trees worldwide in this family. And it really is a pretty impressively beautiful and functional group of plants. This, for example, is island mallow. I don't think you can see, but I have a little photo down here of the typical 5-petal flower of this family. In the case of the island mallow, it's a lovely bright pink. This one I put in because it is a native California plant. And this is a specimen in my yard that is about 8 feet tall. So that is one that's in the group. And then there's, of course, that happy-go-lucky hollyhock that we're all very familiar with. That's also in this family. The hibiscus, I don't know that there is a yard anywhere without at least one hibiscus plant in it. And one of my favorite is the Lavatera, or tree mallow, I think most people call it here. It's a large shrub. I just love the dusty gray leaf, which is year-round, it's evergreen. And then you have that lovely two-tone lavender flower that is present really in my yard almost year-round, with heavier blooms certain times of the year. It's great in the valley because it is very drought tolerant. So I'm hoping that maybe when you see what a special family common mallow comes from, maybe you won't just be hating on it every time you see it in your yard so much. Again, in the mallow family, we have Rose of Sharon, cotton, okra, and my favorite, desert globe mallow. And I'm highlighting that one again because it is a California native. So the real star of this show, as I mentioned, is a common mallow. I just want to make a brief comment here that we who garden probably call little mallow common mallow and vice versa, because they look almost exactly the same. The only way you can really tell them apart is by looking at the flower, the fruit, and if you have good enough eyes or a microscope, the seed. So little mallow, which is Malva parviflora, starts out just looking the same. This one, though, if you ever were to let common mallow become full grown, this is about a 5-foot tall common mallow, and little mallow obviously wouldn't get that large. So looking at the flowers, this lavender one is the common mallow flower, and there really is a little tinge of pink and lavender here. It's just hard to pick it up, but it's a much smaller flower, and this is little mallow. So you can see, you'd have to wait a while for them to flower, and all the time until that flower, you really would not be able to distinguish them. You can see those differences there. And these will bloom from May to October. So it's a long blooming season. The other way we can tell, besides the flower, is looking at the fruit, especially after it's dried. Not so much when it's green, but when it's dried. This is the common mallow fruit, and you can see this texture. These individual wedges are seeds, by the way, and that's how they look when this is ripe. And so it's brown, it's not green. This fruit is ripe. And then with just a little bit of movement and more dryness, these wedges pop out. But this is considered a smooth texture on the common mallow. This is little mallow. This is considered a wrinkled texture. So you can see it looks a little bit different. And again, here are those individual wedges or seeds popped off. So that's how you can tell the difference. But does it really matter to us when we're weeding? No, the nuisance level and the longevity and ever presence of those two is equal. But this is a little bit of some interesting information I'd like to share. The ancient Egyptians in like 2000 BC were using mallow plants. In particular, they were using marshmallows. And that is where marshmallows really originated. Way back, like I said, 2000 BC, the Egyptians were taking the roots and even some of the leaves, boiling that down, extracting the sap, and mixing it with honey, making a froth with it, and letting it dry into sort of a more like a candy than really a marshmallow. But then, of course, you know, the French really like to improve on everything, so they came along and really perfected it by adding the egg and sugar, and really made the marshmallow that we're more used to roasting over the flame. No doubt there are no mallow plants being used in the production of marshmallows today, but it is interesting. And the plant that the particular type of mallow that they used grew in marshes. So it all makes sense, marshmallow. But though marshmallows aren't using mallow as an ingredient today, these microbreweries that are everywhere now have introduced mallow into the small batch beer making industry. And there are quite a few different types of micro brewery beers that do contain mallow. During COVID, with all the quarantine time on my hands and with such an ample crop of mallow in my side yard, I went ahead and cooked it. And it is actually a harvestable or harvested crop in a good part of the world, and is incorporated in the diet just like spinach is in our diet. It doesn't taste quite the same. It has that mucilaginous quality, not quite as much as okra does, but you can see why the ancient Egyptians were thinking, I can do something with this slimy texture, you know, because there is, it does excrete this, you know, slimy sap. And I do suspect that that's why in the early 1900s, early physicians were using that same sap, again, mixing it with sugar and making throat lozenges to give to children to coat the throat. So all in all, a tasty for some people plant, a medicinal plant, and quite versatile. So I thought that was worth mentioning. some other facts about the growing nature of the plant we'll look at. As I said, it grows year-round in California. And so it can be referred to as a winter annual or biennial broadleaf weed. And that's why I was joking in our meeting this past week that it really should be named the California weed because it's ever present. The leaves of the baby sprouting common mallow, the cotyledons, are very smooth edged heart shapes. So when they're first popping up and you see those two little hearts, that's the perfect time to pinch them. That is really the time to get them. And here's an example of a mature leaf, and you can see that it has 5 to 7 lobes, these curves being the lobe, and a little bit of scalloping along there as well. And then each lobe is divided into sections. So I always think it looks rather a bit like a pizza slice. Right down here under Aaliyah's name is a little picture of a tiny cotyledon pair of leaves. I wish you could see that, but anyway, it's down there. And this picture I included to show how it grows as a rosette, which is rather attractive. And you must admit, these leaves look a little bit like geranium leaves, don't they? So if you and it is evergreen. So really, if you have to have a weed crop up someplace, at least this one, if you don't get to it right away, it doesn't look super nasty, if that's any consolation. The plant does, fan out in that rose pattern. And here you can see I've just pulled some up and took some photos of them. I'm mainly wanting to show you, though, how it grows from this crown area. And here's the long taproot. So it has a very long taproot. And if you can, I'll try to hold this right where you can see it. So right when you're going to dig this out, if you're going to hoe this out, you can't cut it there. You've got to cut it there. So you've got to get
where you're pointing. What are you showing us on the?
No, I'm holding it up in my. You can't see me in the picture.
Oh no. Let me see if I can.
Oh,
you were
okay.
in the bottom, but then I took it away because you were covering. Here, maybe this will do it because you were covering the words.
Well, you know what? I'll just point it out here so you can see. If you take, let's say, like a scuffle hoe, a hula hoe, and you just graze the top of the ground right there, you are not. It's going to sprout right from the crown. You have to cut below the crown, which is why I mentioned when you see those two little cotyledon, those first two little leaves, that's your easiest opportunity, because then certainly with a hula hoe, you can get them out or pluck them out. But if they get to this size, which is really not a very big plant, it's, I don't know if anybody who can see this or not, but it's no bigger than this plant I'm holding here. And that's a hard business to do very many of those with a hoe. So it's that deep taproot that gives us one problem with this plant for eradicating it or managing it. Oh, how come it's not advancing? Oh, there we go. Okay. Well, I already mentioned the flower and those pretty 5. Let's go. So between the taproot and, remember I talked about the fruit and how each of these button shaped, really it's called cheeseweed because of the little wheel of cheese shaped fruits. This reproduction by seed is the other problem besides the taproot, because so each one of those fruits has 12 seeds, and each of those 12 seeds is viable for 10 years. So, you know, the first two might germinate the first year that they ripen, because if they get stepped on, and, you know, once they're dried and they get a little nick in that tough outer coating that we saw back here, so you get stepped on and then a little moisture can get in there, then they'll germinate that for the first year that they ripen. But they can hang around. On the 5th year, they get enough weather and dampness and a car runs over them. They decide on the 5th year they're going to emerge. So 10 years of viability is quite a lot. That's the reason we see them all over California all year long, is because they're germinating almost year round. And that taproot lets a lot of people think that they may have hoed them out, but they've only grazed the top off, and a whole new plant is going to sprout from the crown. So there's that fruit again, and you can see how smooth it looks. And again, in some cultures, they boil these almost like we would boil garbanzo beans, you know, or pinto beans, and they make a meal, a dish out of that. And you can see why its common name of common mallow is cheeseweed, because don't these little button fruits look very similar to a wheel of cheese? So we have those crazy little connections, and it's good to know. I mean, even if you're pulling it out of the ground, it's kind of nice to give it a little blessing and know a little more about what you're dealing with and why you're dealing with it. But I'm sure that the main reason you're tuning in is for reasons of managing it. And on that count, there's nothing very exciting, because there's no wonderful new biological control to date. They just haven't found anything. They were investigating a particular fungus, but I don't think that has come to fruition. And if you have any experience as a gardener, I would believe you've already discovered that Roundup or glyphosate is ineffective against this particular weed. The only materials that can eradicate it chemically are available to farmers, you know, like PCAs who, you know, have certification to handle these materials. But to the homeowner, there's no chemical application that is going to eradicate or manage this for you. So it's that, you know, the management part is good old fashioned, you know, pull them when they're young. You really don't want to get too much bigger than this. At these two sizes, you can pluck them with your hand easily, or, I mean, I have too expansive an area. I really need to use like a hula hoe or something. Then I'm not having to, you know, hack through a real thick taproot to get the crown off. All of those particulars, when a plant is large, are pretty tough. So that's a good size. And here we are doing our favorite thing. If we do let them get a little bit too big, like by the time they get this size, I don't know if you can see, but if they're that size, it's time to see if your neighbor has a rototiller. And then you're going to have the problem of some of those crowns are, you're going to probably not get that great of an outcome because some of those crowns are going to root. So really the key here is plucking them when they're young. As far as other controls, culturally, there are a couple of things you can do. They really have to have full sun to germinate. So if those seeds or plants are shaded, that's not hospitable to them. So they might sprout once and you can, be sure they're not going to pick that for a location to become prolific. In addition, a nice heavy layer of mulch, 3 or more inches. I did that on this side yard that I've been working on. And where I went less than 3 inches, those are the places I see a few little green islands starting right now. So what you can do, as I said, plant competitive, desirable plants that you like. And I would, in addition, below those, a nice heavy layer of mulch, and you should be able to keep that at least out of your flower beds. So, last words of wisdom, get them while they're young, and do not waste your money and put more chemicals into the environment that we don't need, because there really is no chemical control. And, as master gardeners go out into the community, that's something I think that's important for the public to know, because oftentimes the average homeowner thinks, well, maybe instead of diluting the Roundup, I'll just put it on straight. So we really want to discourage overuse of chemicals anyway. But when we know that they're going to come to no good use, we really need to educate people that that's a waste of money and extra chemicals going into the environment that we don't need. So happy gardening. And do you have any questions?
I have question. Okay, can you tell what exactly will trick common mallow to germinate seed? What I don't know, what effect, you told it's 10 years the period. During that 10 years they can germinate at any time. Is there any things which will trigger that, trigger point?
Oh, that causes them to germinate?
Yes.
Okay, well, it's just like any other seed. It's moisture and warmth of the sun. So just like when you cast your flower seeds, they're going to lay there. Sometimes the birds will eat a few, but as long as they get moisture and as long as they get the warmth of the sun. Now, the fact that they have a pretty heavy coating, if there's no nick in there or there's no damage, sometimes the first year they are not going to germinate. That's why they have such long viability, is because that coating on them takes a while for the elements, and just to break down so that it can germinate. Now, if cow comes and eats the fruit and then poops it out, it would germinate in that first year, because going through the digestive tract would break down that hard coating. So it's just a matter of that coating breaking down, a little bit of moisture getting in to the interior of the seed so that it can germinate. But it's mostly moisture and warmth.
Okay, and another question, even if it's already kind of big plant and I will dig out the fruit, it's good.
Oh, then you remove that, and any of the seeds fall or the fruit fall, good. You're good. If you can get them out before they flower, even better.
Okay.
So early removal before the fruit matures. That's good. When they're the green button after the petals of the flower fall off, and it's just the little green like cheese wheel that we talked about. If you can get them out then before that little piece of fruit dries up and then the seeds fall out, that's good too. But the very easiest on us is to get the plant when it's tiny. I have trigger fingers in my 2 ring fingers specifically from pulling those little guys. Yes, Brittany.
I also have a question. This is so interesting to me, Sharon, because there's a place near my house where I often take walks, and I think that there is tree mallow based on the photo that you showed, kind of intertwined in the fence. And so, and forgive me if you kind of touched on this earlier, my question is, so can other plants live alongside this mallow, or does it basically choke out any other healthy, viable plants that are near or around it because it is a weed itself?
You know, it's not a choking out plant. You know, it doesn't wind around and vine. It's not like you know, but it is so big in its growth and so dense, many plants in one spot, that it will shade out other things. If you have a lot of it growing and they're coming up along with your flower seeds, your wildflower seeds, it's going to shade out a lot of your flower seeds. Because why? The leaves are big. You know, it's not like a blade of grass going up. It's like a little umbrella. So it would shade out other seeds. But I don't think it's going to choke out anything. It's not that aggressive because it doesn't a lot of spreading roots, like the root system. It's a tap root. It kind of goes straight down with a few other anchoring roots and feeding roots. And it grows in a rosette fashion. So it's just kind of growing like this. It's not sending out tendrils, and it's not, you know, like clover grows or Bermuda grass grows, where it sends out another little foot and takes root and then grows again and again. So no, it's not like that. And I don't think it would be an island mallow. That I think it might be just a common mallow that you've seen, because the island mallow is, like I said, it's a native California plant, but it's more native to the Channel Islands, and they're not even easy to find when you go looking for, you know, like you want to plant one in your yard. So unless somebody just out of some kind of bizarre chance happened to plant an island mallow, I think it's just a very large common mallow, because truly this one on this page right here was taller than I am and was in my neighbor's yard, which is where all my mallow has come from. But they're not here, so I can say that.
Well,
So is that plant, Sharon, is that plant that you're showing, is that got one big root?
That is probably about 6 plants all bunched together.
Okay.
So there's probably,
Hard to take out.
probably, if you got in there and sorted it out, it just looks like one big bush. It looks almost like that island mallow bush that I showed. But this is probably several all bunched up in one place. They're very, very happy over there. But they do somehow cross the street. I guess because the fruit is in the shape of a wheel, I think they just roll on over.
It makes you kind of question the definition of a weed, because it has pretty flowers and the plant itself isn't bad looking. So what, no harm, no foul, you know?
But that's what I'm saying. If you've got to have a weed, I mean, except that when you do decide you're going to deal with it, if you let it get that big, you better have a good, strong shoulders and back, because that taproot is going to go deep. But it is, I mean, it's evergreen. It has that kind of big, cool looking leaf that to me does look very ornamental. You know, I mean, that doesn't look so bad.
Mm-mm. It
You
looks
know,
like a giant geranium that I'm just looking, where's the plant? Where's the flowers on it?
yeah, no. And I mean, if my neighbor had a whole lot of Johnson grass, oh, I'd probably just have to move, but I can live next door to this.
But will Mallow compete for nutrients with other plants around it?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. It'll take the, unfortunately, it can grow pretty well. It's pretty drought tolerant. You know, that's another reason why it's so pervasive in the state. While other weeds are shriveling up because, you know, it's 102 degrees and they're spent, they can't take it. These guys, just because of that fleshiness that there is to them, they can hold water, not like a succulent, but they can stay healthy a long time. So certainly if they're in your flower beds, they're gonna be taking water that is very valuable, and nutrients as well. So better they give their nutrients back to the compost pile, but only without the seeds on them.
Any more questions? Okay, in this case, thank you, Sharon. It was very educated presentation. I learned a lot of, and I think everybody else. And there's some facts like I never knew about, like about beer and marshmallow. So it was great. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, the next potluck, Master Gardener potluck, I will be bringing some cooked mallow for you.
Okay.